watching Numbskull Music, and today we're going to get into Volume 3, what I'm calling the harder side of Sears, if you will. And this video will directly address pretty much a blatant lie been told about the 90s for years. Guys like Eddie Trunk, 70s and 80s kids, when talking about the 90s, said, oh, the 90s killed metal. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the 90s was all about metal and embracing it. Maybe not your BS hairband crap, all that went away quickly. Most of thrash was killed off in the 90s because most of it sucks. And really the music, didn't suck, but the vocalists sure did. And if you know anything about the 90s, we kind of had an ear for vocalists. We wanted good vocals. If we didn't get good vocal, then at least a vocal that kind of fit the music, had a certain character and a tone to it that we can kind of get behind a little bit. So the 90s itself, it as far as musically goes, was way darker than anything before that. Just look at the mainstream of rock at the time, whether that's Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, all that stuff, much darker undertones, lyrically very dark, hard subject matter. And also look at bands that blew up at the time. We're talking Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera. Phil Anselmo himself has talked about Far Beyond Driven being the hardest album ever to get to number one. And he's probably true. Right there with the Black Album as far as just heaviness. I don't know. I think Far Beyond Driven is a heavier album than the Black Album. So I think I would agree with that. But if you turn and look to the underground, this is the period where death metal takes off. It's known as the golden age of death metal. It started in the 80s, but these guys weren't making money. They weren't able to tour. They weren't able to quit their day jobs and be a full-time musician. Not until the 90s. And then you had the rise of record labels that supported those guys like Metal Blade and Roadrunner. And you're talking to some of the filthiest, nastiest freaking metal that's ever came out. I mean, think about it. You had Cannibal Corpse. All right, a band called Cannibal Corpse in a scene in Ace Ventura. That's amazing. You also had White Zombie on Airheads. It's a movie. I know it wasn't as well remembered as Ace Ventura, but they had a prominent scene in Airheads. Megadeth does a song for The Last Action Hero that turns out to be a pretty big hit. Even Metallica had a song for Mission Impossible. I think it was the second Mission Impossible movie, and that became a big hit. So metal was just everywhere. It was mainstream. Even the underground stuff started making money. You had death metal bands with gold records. If you want even more proof, I mean, this is the era where black metal became a thing. It started in the 80s, and no one paid any attention. It's just a bunch of noise, crap. Even hardcore metal fans were like, crap. And then in the 90s, they started generating enough funds to start touring. And, for a lot of reasons became infamous. I won't go into any of that. You can look that shit up somewhere else. But there's no doubt legendary bands came out of that. And then you had the new wave of American heavy metal. That started in the 90s. Machine Head, Mastodon, Lamb of God, Shadows Fall. All of that started up in the 90s, people. And I've almost forgot, Fear Factory, had a prominent song in a fight scene in Mortal Kombat. This is a video game movie using Fear Factory. That's kind of nuts. And we all love Sepultura, but their biggest albums came in the 90s. Their classic stuff. And those guys became legends in the 90s. You know, and then Max Calavera left him, did Soulfly, and Soulfly, you know, that's probably the greatest new metal band ever to me. I just love it. But beyond that, you had other underground bands, you know, Clutch, who are still growing strong today. Acid Bath, which gave birth to Dax Riggs, and you know he's got a loyal following and a bit of a legend himself, an underground legend. And do we need to talk about all the damn new genres of metal and subgenres of metal? You know, I'll give you just a few. You know, I talked about death metal, talked about black metal, the new wave of American heavy metal, talked about those, but there's also new metal, industrial metal, alternative metal. Those are just the mainstream ones. I mean, there's been an ass ton, and I'm not naming everything. That's just a handful, small handful of the new metal genres that popped off in the 90s. You know, and the heaviness and the darkness just didn't stay with, you know, really your mainstream alternative or alternative metal or metal in general. But if you hear how hip hop changed in the 90s, definitely darker undertones. And some of it rather sinister sounding. If you uh you know, Murder Was the Case That They Gave Me by Snoop Dogg. I mean that sounds like a freaking metal song. I mean, I'm just saying that it permeated the atmosphere of music in the 90s. This darkness, this heaviness, this serious undertone, aggression. And all of that helped make the 90s the greatest era of music, period. Anyway, thanks for watching this crap, and I'll be back with some more crap later. Bye.